John, welcome back to the show.
Cable, it's great to be back.
My pleasure, brother. So you actually just had me on your show, and we talked a lot about what hunting adventures I've been up to. So let's find out what our old buddy has been doing so far this fall.
Well, I've had one hunt this year, but it's been a big hunt, and
Hmm.
I drew a cow moose tag in Colorado this year. Found out in June that I was doing that. Went up to Colorado in early October, had a great hunt up there. Ended up taking a nice mature cow moose on that hunt.
And that was a rifle hunt.
That was a rifle hunt. Yep. So they do things. They do have a archery and muzzleloader seasons up there as well. And I
Hmm.
thought about maybe trying to do muzzleloader, but I ended up going rifle.
Okay. And so, as far as Colorado's concerned, I I've hunted over the counter there for elk with a bow.
Hmm.
I've done muzzleloader mule deer there,
Hmm.
which I think that actually took 2 or 3 points. Um, was this a situation where you had to burn any points, or is there an over the counter
Nope.
tag for?
Nope. No over the counter stuff for any moose, even cows. I burned
Oh,
all my
this is a
points.
moose. I'm
Yes.
sorry. For some reason, I had in my head, and I knew that because you sent me a picture. That's even cooler. Okay, I was thinking elk for some reason. So this was a drawn hunt.
Yeah. Was a draw hunt. Burned all my points.
Uh-huh.
The bull hunts. So Colorado is a they do two different systems in their state. So like you mentioned, with there's some over the counter elk, but like everything else, as far as the other elk, your deer, your antelope are preference points.
Yeah, and they're doing away with that too. So
Yeah, doing away with the over the counter stuff.
yeah,
Yeah. The moose are a
got to
bonus
feed the
point
wolves,
system.
John.
Yeah. But they have a bonus point system for moose. So instead of
Okay.
the person with the most points being guaranteed to draw it, once you get above 3 points for moose, you have a chance to draw. And then everybody has a chance. So if you have 20 points, you have a better chance than someone with three.
Hmm.
But it can be either way. It's never guaranteed, in other words. The cow moose tags are easier to get than a bull moose, but they're still really
Sure.
hard to get. And I just got really lucky.
Mm. So how many points did you have?
I'd rather not say, but
Okay.
but I have zero now.
Yeah.
And this is one of those deals where guys can put in for, say, 30 years, and you may even have some people emailing you after the show saying, "Oh, I took me 35 years or whatever to draw my moose tag in Colorado," and that
That's
happens a
why you
lot.
don't want to say it because people are going to send you hate mail. And, "Yeah, you jerk."
I burned a sizable chunk of points on it like
Mhm.
that, but like I said, it's easier to get the cow tag than it is a bull. The price is the same though. So
Mm.
you end up forking over a good chunk of change to go on a cow moose hunt.
Yeah. Well,
Still
so what
less.
does that cost? I mean, that's public knowledge.
I think it was like $2,100
Okay.
for the actual tag, plus all the other stuff. I got the
Yeah.
Colorado regs here. Let me look so I'm not.
So that's, I mean, short of, a bighorn tag in most of the western states, that's about as pricey as it gets.
It is, so I think Wyoming's stuff has gotten more expensive here lately, especially in the special draw that they have. But yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, moose are right up there, like you said. They're actually really in the same price tier as bighorn sheep and mountain goat. So
Yeah.
25.44 for a non-resident moose tag in Colorado.
That's pricey.
Hmm.
But how many times are you going to get to do that?
That was the way that I looked at it, and especially so you can go to Canada, you can go to Alaska on a moose hunt as you've
Mm.
done, but you're hunting Canada moose or you're hunting Alaska moose. You're not hunting Shiras moose, which was what I was hunting in Colorado. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to see what I can do with this.
Mm. Yeah, I can't say in all the times I've hunted Colorado that I've seen a moose. I have seen them in Wyoming,
Hmm.
which is pretty cool, elk hunting there. And then done the Newfoundland moose hunt as well. But what do you think that this cow weighed?
She was every bit as big, maybe bigger than a mature bull elk.
Okay, so 700-ish pounds somewhere in there.
Yeah, maybe bigger. She was big. I mean those quarters we were taking off of her were just massive, and a
Mm.
bull moose, of course, would be even bigger. But man, she was plenty of work to get out just her.
And so, what was that hunt like? Was that like a backpack in hunt or?
So I ended up booking with an outfitter up there because I
Okay.
got, like the way I always thought I would do this was like, gosh, I'm going to try and just draw one of these tags and I'll figure the logistics out. And then I drew the
Sure.
tag in June. And so I just had a couple months to go before the season started in October. And I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? And, moose like to live, like, as you know, in real low-lying, wet areas. Not all the time, but
Boggy. Yeah.
yeah, that's one of their favorite places to get. It's like, man, what if I go out there and I shoot one of these moose and it's just, I could see it just turning into a nightmare to get out. And so I ended up booking with an outfitter up in Colorado that specialized in that sort of deal. And so they hunted a mix of private and public land. You can't, like, they had horses, they had ATVs, they had trucks, and you can also get in with good old-fashioned boot leather, just kind of depending on where the moose were being found. But I ended up finding this moose in a willow bottom that was kind of low-lying, just like I was saying. Not high elevation at all, but it was just nasty, uh, boggy, just wet stuff there. Perfect stereotypical moose habitat,
Hmm.
willows everywhere. We were up a little bit higher than where the moose were in there looking down into it, but we were, I don't know, 30 feet above it, something like that. So not like super high, but we were glassing down into it. Saw a bunch of moose moving back and forth through this area over the preceding few days, but there were no cows. We're seeing bulls and whatnot. And then a couple days in, we saw a cow that actually climbed up out of there and got behind us, and we didn't see her till she was behind us, but then she had winded us at that point and took off running. And we saw another moose that was on the wrong side of a fence on private property we couldn't hunt on. And then she never would come our way. And then finally, we ended up kind of finding this cow towards the end of the hunt in this area that we could end up hunting.
Hmm.
And then of course that was the end of the hunt right there. That was a real fun, real busy morning.
I'm sure. So the rut, I mean, typically moose in North America rut in August, September.
hmm
Was there any rutting activity still going on? And did you guys try to use any cow calls or anything like that?
So we were towards the end of the rut. The
Uh-huh.
bulls were hanging out with cows a little bit at this point. Talking to the guys that I was hunting with, they had had some bull hunters out there the previous week, right at the beginning of the rifle season, and they were saying that they were able to call in the bulls at that point in early October, and they actually had a guy shoot a real nice bull that, as it turns out, had a cow with him that they didn't know about because she was in the real thick stuff. So they shot this bull and they went up to it, and that cow was with them. And that cow was real mad, and it took a while for them to get rid of her. We especially when we saw that cow on the other side of the fence, we did call to her a little bit, and she would look at us, but showed
Mhm.
no interest in actually coming our way. And so it seemed to be from that and from talking to them that the cow moose, you can't really call them in. Um,
Okay. Because
they're
you
you can.
can call cow elk in all day.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
So they said they tried it and they just never had any success doing it. And
yeah.
when we tried it, that's kind of what we got too.
Okay. And so, how far away were you when you shot it?
So this moose, so we'd been looking at this area, this big willow bottom, for a couple days, and moose would show up maybe 200 yards away from us into there, and it turns out like they were all kind of walking along the same path, using this area as a travel corridor, and they'd appear in an opening. And we'd see them for a few seconds and they disappear, and then we'd see them like 100 yards like further down in the next opening, that sort of thing. So I was all set up. We were sitting there glassing. I was set up on a tripod with my rifle, and so I was preparing to shoot into one of those openings that they would pop up in. This morning, the last morning of the hunt, we saw a nice bull out there in front of us, and then a smaller bull, and then we saw another cow on the wrong side of the fence, but she was kind of heading our direction. We're like, okay, maybe she's going to jump this fence, and we'll get a shot on her. And so I look off to the right, and I'm looking at her, and I just kind of look back in front of us, and it turns out a cow had stood up right in front of us, 130 yards away.
Oh wow.
I'm assuming had been there the whole time. She may have even been there on one of the previous days, but it was, as I'll tell you here in a minute, the underbrush there was so thick, those willows were so thick that they were over my head, and so they, even as big as a moose was, they were as big or bigger than her. And so she could have been there the whole time, just didn't know it. But
Mm.
I'm guessing that she was bedded down in there and then had just stood up that morning, stretch her legs, get ready to get some breakfast. And like I said, 130 yards away, it's just like, oh, geez, she's right there. Um, the guide and I were afraid that if we weren't careful, we would shoot a bull moose with real small antlers. And so we just had to be real careful about that. And so he
Yeah.
checked her out, made sure, okay, this is a cow. I get my tripod, I slide it over, get locked in, ready to go. And I ended up shooting her right there. She was um, close. She was quartering to me, but not super steep, slight quartering to angle. So I shot her right on the point of the shoulder, and that bullet kind of raked back across her, exited out the other side. I was shooting a Bergara Sierra rifle, 7 PRC, suppressed, banished backcountry suppressor, and 170 grain terminal ascent bullet from Hornady for that 7 PRC, not Hornady, Federal, sorry. Um, Hit her hard. Hear that bullet just hit with a loud slap, and she staggers, turns around, and runs maybe 10 yards away from us. Stops, turns again, also right shoulder facing us. I reacquire her in the scope, and at this point, I've chambered another round. And I shoot again, and I hit within two inches of that first shot on that shoulder. But due to the angle this time, that first shot went back through her. The next one went forward through her.
Mm.
So I hit, like I said, almost in the same spot on that near side lung, and then but the other shots were maybe 2 feet apart on the other side, right at the front of the lung, right at the back of the other lung. She staggered, fell down, got back up, and was real unsteady, and then fell over again. And I actually got the whole thing on video through my trigger cam. She was on her feet maybe 22, 23 seconds after the
Oh,
first
wow.
shot.
Yeah. Wow. And then the work starts.
And then the work starts, right? So we climb down off this little overlook, and there
How
was a
far away is the truck or ATV or however you guys are
So
transporting?
fortunately, we could. So we walked in there, but we could, and this is what we ended up doing: drive the truck up to right where we were glassing. It was real
Okay.
flat, easy ground right there. So we drive right up to there, descend into this just nasty thicket of willows. And like I said, the stuff that when you're looking at it from above and from a distance, it looks like it's knee or waist height. Turns out to be taller than me. So we go down in there, and there was a creek that we saw that we thought, oh, okay, we'll cross it, no problem. And I go in to stick my foot in it, and it like my foot almost all the way up to my knee just disappears in this muck. Hell,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was like it's like quicksand. I was not prepared for that, and it was just way too wide to get across, and so we ended up spending the better part of the next hour just trying to get to her into all that. We finally found a more narrow spot in the creek where we could get to it and all that stuff, and then luckily I had marked where I thought she fell on my GPS. I got that new Loopold RX 5000 rangefinder that'll drop a pin where you on Onyx maps where you lays them. And so I before we left the glassing spot, I hit the spot where I saw her fall with the laser rangefinder, synced it to Onyx. I was like, okay, here's the pin. This is just where we got to go. And through all that, right, going up, around, behind, all that and everything, we're like, golly, where the heck is she? But I had marked where she was, and we were able to get to within about 10 feet of where she actually fell based on
Mm.
that. And then we'd look, and she's laying right there. Like, oh, okay, all right, now we found her. Now we need to get her out. So we took some pictures, and then spent the next about 2.5 hours, the three of us butchering her out right there, and then carrying her out.
So you went solo and just with the outfitter?
Yep, that's right. Yep. So
Yeah.
I was with one-on-one with one guide, and then when we got it down, we called in reinforcements, and another guy came out with us. And while we were out there, some more people came out and met us, and it ended up making it a whole lot less work. But we got started on it right there, just the three of us, and then by the
So
end of
did
it,
you debone it or did you actually try to put a quarter on your back and walk it
put
to the truck?
put quarters on the back and walked out to the truck. Yeah, luckily it was not. Once we knew what the path was in to get there, it was not a super long walk to get out.
Hmm.
But and luckily, you're carrying this thing a couple hundred yards instead of carrying it miles and miles
Miles.
through
Yeah.
through there. Yeah.
Oh, super cool.
Mhm.
And if anyone out there, and this is specific, well, and I don't know what your motivation was to to say I want to go hunt Shiras moose and pay, that's a pretty penny.
Hmm.
I don't know. Are you trying to work your way through the North American big game species?
So I am to a certain degree. I don't think
Okay.
I'm ever going to hunt sheep or goat or anything, but I've always wanted to hunt moose.
Hmm.
And I figured, like I said, I can go to Canada, I can go to Alaska and do that, but I really wanted a Shiras moose. And I was like, I'm going to get to hunt moose. If it's a cow moose or if it's a bull, it'll be a little bit different experience, but at least I'll get to do it. And I was like, I'm going to try and maximize my odds here with the cow moose, and that's what ended up happening. And
Yeah.
so now I'm done with that. I'll try and put in probably for Utah and Wyoming and Montana that also have Shiras moose, but who knows if I'm ever going to draw. And if I do, then I'll go do that. And part of the deal was, like I said, I wanted to hunt moose. I wanted the experience. I've enjoyed hunting in Colorado these last few years, and I'm glad I got that under my belt. And now I have literally a whole freezer full of moose meat too.
Yeah. Well, and that's super cool. I don't know if I'll ever. I do. I mean, I have Shiras points in Wyoming and Montana,
Hmm.
and I think I have some in Colorado. And when we get off there, you'll tell me how many you had to use to get it, and then no, I'm just kidding. Um, but yeah, I mean, there is the opportunity, and you increase your odds by saying, okay, I'll be happy with a cow.
Hmm.
And on one of my New Mexico elk hunts, we came across. It was opening weekend of Bighorn, Rocky Mountain Bighorn season,
Hmm.
and everyone we came across was hunting ewes,
Oh, interesting.
doing the
Huh.
same thing, right? We're checking this off the list,
Hmm.
and they were successful. I mean, in his like anyone that's been around Bighorn sheep, the rams are pretty wary of people. Sometimes
Hmm.
the ewes will just walk right up to you, and I mean, I've seen people, my dad, feed them right out of his hand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah. They like trail mix, so. But yeah, I mean, if you want to check species off that for one reason or another are unattainable, whether it's odds or finding. I mean, you said you'll probably never hunt sheep. I probably won't either because
Hmm.
it's $50,000 just to get into the game. Maybe Doll sheep's the most affordable, and those things last time I checked were up over 30 now.
It's
So
funny. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day who is he's in his 70s and he started sheep hunting in the 1980s, and he has taken the North American Slam. I can't remember exactly how many North American Sheep Slam. I can't remember exactly how many sheep he's taken, but I think he's taken 8. But he's
mm,
taken Rocky Mountain Bighorn Desert, a couple stones, and a couple Doll sheep. And he and I kind of penciled out how much he paid for all of those hunts, and it was I think like $35,000 in outfitter fees, not including the tags and the plane
mm.
fees and all that, or plane tickets. I was like, my goodness, man, like you can't even get one sheep hunt for what you spent
No,
on all these hunts.
yeah, I was the same situation. I was visiting with a buddy's grandfather at Ducks Unlimited banquet a
Hmm.
couple years ago, and he same deal. He started sheep hunting in the late '70s, early '80s, and has multiple sheep slams. And I think he told me it was $1,500 for his first stone sheep,
Jeez.
and then you can also, oh, by the way, hunt grizzly or caribou or like
Hmm.
whatever. And they were just like giving that part of the hunt away, maybe a couple $100 for those.
Yeah, you buy the tag and then you pay a couple $100 trophy fee if you
I'm
end
gonna
up shooting
sell my
something.
house to have to do that today.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And here's my firstborn child as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'll change my mind, but I don't know, maybe, but it just doesn't
Maybe when
hold.
hunting podcasts start making people millionaires.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. But of the things I would rather hunt, I would rather go on another moose hunt or another elk hunt or something like that. Several of those than go for sheep. But different strokes for different folks. I know some people are really into it.
Oh, who was it? Who was I talking to the other day? They were describing the sheep phenomenon as I can't remember who it was, but it was very detailed conversation. And the idea of the sheep slam has what has made it so expensive.
Hmm.
And it isn't a lot of hardcore hunters they're doing it. The guy was telling my God, I can't remember who this was. But he told me he's talked to guides who have taken people on a sheep hunt, and that was the first hunt they ever went on.
My
And so why would
goodness.
they do that? Well, it's because it's like a status thing. Like, I'm going to get my sheep slam.
Yeah.
And, for that financial bracket, hey, I mean, if you have the expendable income, I'm not knocking them. Good, more power to them, whatever. I would do the same thing. But it's, it's more of a status symbol among friends in some circles. Whereas, I would sell my firstborn child to go on a stone sheep hunt, I mean, no, I really wouldn't. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things I would do to go sheep hunting. But, financially, my kids probably want to go to college at some point.
Well,
So,
the funny thing is like as far as expensive as a moose hunt is, and it can be very expensive, it's not nearly as expensive as a sheep hunt. And as
no,
good as sheep meat is, and I never had it, but I've heard it's fantastic. You don't get nearly as much of it as you do get with the moose hunt, which is also fantastic with the
yeah.
meat quality.
So did you have to buy a new freezer?
No, I have a big chest freezer in my garage that happened to be. I worked real hard all summer to empty that thing out with meat. We ate a lot of deer and pork and all
Hmm.
that stuff in it, and so it was ready to go to fill that thing up with the moose.
Nice. That reminds me, I need to go pick up that red stag. It's ready at the processor. Red
So
stag elk hybrid
yeah,
that we were talking about on your show.
yeah, we'll
Uh,
see. We'll see how that one tastes compared to a regular elk.
yeah, I've eaten red stag and I've eaten elk, and they're such close cousins. I doubt I'll be able to tell a
Mhm.
difference. I really do. But we'll find out pretty soon. Yeah, when I shot my moose in Newfoundland, I did have to. Well, here's a cool thing about that, and that hunt is I think around 12 grand or so.
Mhm.
Um, Now I think it was 10 when I went the first time, but I'm going back in 2026. They put all of your meat on an frozen, refrigerated 18 wheeler,
Mhm.
and they stop at I think either 8 or 10 North American cities, and they're driving it from Newfoundland all the way down, and they stop in like Chicago and New York and blah blah. And Dallas is one of the stops, so it was just like
Ah,
he said, your meat will be ready around New Year's, and I think on January 2nd, I got a phone call and it said, come to this distribution plant to pick up your moose. And it was that easy. So, yeah. And then I did have to go buy I had to go to Costco and buy a freezer because the one I had was, that's the end of hunting season,
yeah, it was all
January, and
full.
it
Yeah.
was full. And I'm like, well, geez, now I've got hundreds of more pounds of meat.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I had to. And I'll tell you a secret. I took the moose. I had some left over still, and I shot this thing in 2018,
Mhm.
and I took some of it to deer camp for opening weekend and fed it to all my buddies and didn't tell them
Jeez.
how old it was. I told them it was moose.
Yeah. It still tasted good though, huh?
It was still fine. Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
freezer burned or anything. It was great.
So what I did on this hunt, this is the first time I've had occasion to do this, but it worked well, and I'm going to do it again in the future. Was I brought a small Yeti cooler, like
Hmm.
one that you would take for a day trip to the beach or whatever, a soft-sided one. I brought that with me as a carry-on on the plane ride out there. I filled it with snacks on the way out there. I took my son with me, and then we took the one of the back straps, the tenderloin, and the heart of the moose, put them in a freezer in camp, and then froze them solid. Then I put them in that cooler, and I brought it on the plane with me as a carry-on the way back. So I got some of the meat back,
Yeah.
it instantly like that. And that was, I think I weighed it all. It was about 40 pounds all told. So I couldn't have gotten that other back strap in there. I would have gone over the 50-pound weight limit. It
Yeah.
wasn't an issue bringing it on the plane or any of that stuff either.
That's cool. The only thing I have done that is similar is I checked the mountain lion hide. Not didn't check. Sorry, I carried it on,
Hmm.
and in the same thing in a a handheld cooler.
Hmm.
And the guys that were X-raying it were like, "What is that?" And I told them I kind of whispered, and they're like, "That's cool. Can we look inside?"
Huh.
And I was like, "Sure, open it." And they were just like, "This is the first time we've ever had a mountain lion come through the scanner." Yeah.
So did you have the skull and the hide or just the hide?
No, skull and the hide.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
they wanted to know what the meat was and they wanted to look in it, but like, oh,
uh,
okay, it's frozen meat. All right, have a nice day. That sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. No, but I mean, getting stuff back anywhere in the United States and even Canada, I've checked. We froze our bear hides
Hmm.
and skulls, and put them in like we went to the hardware store there and got a big giant container Rubbermaid thing,
Hmm.
taped it up and shipped that home, no problem. Flying it all the way back from Canada. So
Yeah, there you go, man. So there was no way I was going to be able to take the whole moose hunt with me, but this was a nice way to get some of it home instantly and not have to pay at all for it.
did you already eat the heart?
I have not eaten the heart yet. I've eaten everything else. I ate the tenderloins and the backstrap. I'll be doing that here soon. I
Yeah.
think it's big.
And so where does moose stack up on, like, as far as your favorite wild game?
Gosh, man, it's near the top. Eland, I think, is better, but I think moose may be like right below it. Ah, God, Axis is right there too.
I agree with you. I
Yeah.
think moose is the best North American big game animal that I've hunted for sure. It's the one where, and that was part of the reason why I'm going back, because we're about out of moose. Like, and
Yeah.
it's 6 years later, and we still have a little. But Erin was like, "When are you going to shoot another moose?" I'm like, "I don't know. I have any really plans." She goes, "I really like that meat the most," and I was like, "All right, I guess you talked me into it." So,
All right, have you
going back.
had sandhill crane?
Oh yeah, I've done
Yeah.
quite a few crane hunts. Yeah,
So
it's
where
phenomenal.
does crane rank with moose for you?
Oh, it's hard to say. I'll tell you this. I invited my family over the holidays. This was a decade ago.
Hmm.
And my mom says she doesn't like wild game. Okay.
Hmm.
She's not a hunter. My dad doesn't hunt. He's a bass fisherman. But I kebabbed a bunch of sandhill cranes from West Texas. We got back from a hunt. Put vegetables and mushrooms, the whole deal. Seasoned them up real nice, grilled them, medium rare. When she was done eating it, she was like, "That was such good steak," because I told her that's what it was.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah, so you actually like sandhill crane?" And she goes, "What is that?" And I showed her a picture, and she goes, "That's disgusting." I was like, "You just said how good it was. I
Yeah,
tricked
that's
you into
right.
thinking it was a steak." So, no, sandhill crane's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My crane may be better than moose. They're both really good though.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick a winner between them.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, congrats on the moose. That's super cool. And if anyone out there is interested, there's your way to make it happen as far as hunting moose in the lower 48. Um, let's shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about the history of a caliber. And you're the guy that I always bring on whenever it's time to do such things.
There you go.
And I want to talk about the 243.
Hmm.
Because the 243 has a special place in my heart. I got a long time ago, my first three rifles, Howa sent them to me. And I got a 243, a 308, and a 300 Win Mag. And I just fell in love with that 243. This is going back almost 15 years ago.
Hmm.
And I've shot more pigs, really, and coyotes with it than anything else. But my kids use it to hunt deer all the time.
Hmm.
And Henry's killed 5 deer with it. And when I am just driving around the ranch, filling feeders or whatever it is, it's his 243 that I always grab and just put it in the front seat of the truck.
Hmm.
If I see a coyote or a pig, and I just absolutely love it. And you can always find ammunition. But this caliber goes back, I think, to the mid 1950s.
Hmm.
And I mean, this is just from Wikipedia. It says it took whitetail hunting by storm. So I guess very quickly, this caliber, because of its versatility, really, because it is, and I don't think people realize, John, that the 243 is a relatively flat shooting caliber.
Yeah, it's super flat shooting. So it's a 308 Winchester neck down to 243 caliber or 6
Mhm.
millimeter. And so it can shoot a lighter bullet really fast or faster than a 308 can, and it does it with less recoil. So you can shoot say, 80 grain bullet. That's a kind of a common load for the 243, excuse me, 80, 90, 100 grain bullets are very common. But it'll shoot a 90 grain
Mhm.
bullet, say 3,100-ish feet per second, a 100 grain bullet, a little bit slower, maybe a little under 3,000. So you're getting velocities up there, especially with the lighter stuff that's toward what you would get with a 223, but you're doing it with a 80, 90 grain bullet. like that. So it's flat shooting, and especially with the right bullets, it's a darn capable big game cartridge. And you could even go down to say a lighter. I think Hornady makes a 58 grain bullet for it that for varmints that you could shoot at darn near 4,000 feet per second. And you can get like a 75 grain varmint bullet, whatnot, that's going a little bit slower. So you can use it for varmints if you wanted to, or you can use it for deer size game and stuff maybe even bigger.
Do you think that the increased popularity of the 6.5 Creedmoor has negatively affected how many people are still taking a 243 to the field?
Probably so. It's probably cannibalized the 243 a little bit. But I think the 243 is one of those calibers that may never go away because even though the 6.5 Creedmoor isn't like a heavy kicking cartridge, it still has a lot more recoil than the 243. And so it still kind of fits in that recoil shy hunter category. It's great for kids, but it's not limited just to kids. There's plenty of grown-ups that hunt with it too. And like I said, it's so darn flat shooting and it just works.
Yeah, and I asked about that 6.5 because I'm taking my son to Africa with me this summer, and Carl was like, "Well, what rifle does he shoot?" And I'm like, "Oh, he shoots a Mossberg 243." He's like, "I really like for him to get up to a 6.5 Creedmoor as kind of a baseline with a 140 grain bullet, just because some of the animals are probably going to be a little bigger than a white-tailed deer. Some might be smaller, yeah, but he's like, I really want him to have a bigger bullet." And so with a suppressor, it's not really too much to ask. He'll be 12, but he doesn't weigh very much. He's only like 85 pounds soaking wet. But you put a suppressor on there and cut that recoil almost in half, and piece of cake.
Yeah. So the thing that you're talking about taking him back to the East Cape then, right, of South Africa, a little bit more open country hunt then, right? Yeah. So the thing that you're going to need to keep in mind with this is the 243 is going to shoot a lot flatter than the 6.5 Creedmoor, and it will need less holdover, and it will do better. It'll stay above that minimum impact velocity threshold farther than the 6.5 Creedmoor. Say with the 6.5 Creedmoor, you'll be going 2,700 feet per second, something like that. The Nosler partition, which is such a fantastic bullet for everything, but to include the 6.5 Creedmoor, 140 grain bullet there. It's going to start out going kind of slow, and then it's not super aerodynamic, so it's going to slow down quickly. Let me pull up the numbers here, and we'll see what you're going to be looking at with that 140 partition. I would shoot, say, with the Creedmoor with 140 grain partition, I would shoot everything up to and including kudu, no problem with it. It's a great bullet for it, all that stuff.
You think I'm going to spoil my kid and let him shoot a kudu on his first safari?
But
here's your springbuck, buddy. Yeah, nice try.
So springbuck, no problem. Blessbuck, Impala, no problem at all. Warthog, fine. But you can do the same thing with a 100 grain partition out of a 243, and it's going to recoil a little less for them, and it's going to work just as well if you use a really good bullet like that.
Okay. Wow. So you think he could take the 243?
He certainly can.
I know we wouldn't shoot a kudu with it, but anything, any of the other stuff, Impala,
caliber gets.
Springbuck,
I love talking about caliber as much as the next guy, right? I mean, that's really kind of how I made my start in this, just doing caliber comparisons and all of that stuff. But in any situation, I would rather take a lighter caliber with a great bullet. Say if you're using a great bullet in both of them, like a partition, a lighter caliber that you can shoot really, really accurately over something that's pushing it a little bit. And the 6.5 Creedmoor is not going to kill him or any of that stuff. But if he has that 243 and he likes it and he's comfortable with it and he shoots it well, see how it shoots those 100 grain partitions, and that would be what I lean toward, especially for that smaller stuff that you're talking about having him hunt anyway.
Well, I mean, it's not going to be a situation where, because I'll have a 300 Win Mag over there for whatever I'm hunting, and I'm not going to be able to be like, here, buddy, shoot this, and knock him on his ass. I did that one time with the 7 mag, and it didn't go over very well. He was like, "Nope, don't want to do that again, Dad. Thanks for nothing." There, he's like, "Now my shoulder hurts," and this was during COVID, so he was probably like 7,
Yeah.
and I handed him
Oof.
that 7 mag with a, I think it was 160 grain ish bullet somewhere in there,
Hmm.
but it was suppressed, so he shot his 243. He was like, he likes that. He shoots all the time. I
Hmm.
was like, okay, now try shooting the 6.5 with the thermal on it. He's like, cool. I want to shoot the thermal scope. That'd be fun. Shoots that. He's like, that recoiled a little. Took the can off there, slapped it on the 300 Win mag or the 7 mag, and he was like, nope, that's too much. So,
You know,
do you think that the AccuBond would be something to consider there? Or would you stick with the partition?
the AccuBond is also a good bullet. I personally prefer the partition. You
Mm-hmm.
get a larger wound channel with it, a wider wound channel. It's going to do more damage. And just by the nature of how it's constructed, that partition is usually going to also penetrate better than the AccuBond will. You lose a lot of weight and stuff with it, and you're not going to have as big of a expanded frontal diameter usually with the partition, but you're going to make a nasty, nasty wound channel, say 3 to 12 inches into the animal, which is where the heart and lungs are going to be on most shots. And like I said, the way thing always shakes out with it is the partition's always going to penetrate a little bit deeper too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably going to exit, and even if it doesn't, you're going to find it on the opposite hide, right under the skin on the offside hide. The
Yeah,
AccuBond is, like I said, it's also good. It just works differently, and you're not going to get quite as much penetration, though it's still probably going to be really good.
yeah. Well, and like we were talking about earlier, the partition is what I took on my last safari, and it performed perfectly
Hmm.
on, I think, the 3 animals I shot: kudu, lechwe, and a zebra, and did get those massive wound channels, and they call it an impact extruded bullet,
Hmm.
whatever that means. But no, Maddie dumbed it down for us and said, think of like a truck and trailer where you slam on your brakes real fast. Well, that trailer is still pushing your truck forward. So it's got the front part of the bullet, and then here comes the back part still driving through that animal.
Hmm.
So we'll see.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that is, the textbook definition, like you said, of the partition like that, where you lose almost all that front core as it goes in all different directions. You have lead fragments going everywhere outwards from it, making their own wound channels and all that, causing more damage to the animal, while that rear core stays intact and just punches straight through. So you kind of get the best of both worlds with it, where you get penetration that is approaching what you would get with, say, a copper bullet, like a Barnes or
Yeah.
something like that, but you also get that wider wound cavity as well. So, like I said, that is, if it were me going there and I'm like, hey, we want to maximize the capability of a 243 to hunt Africa, that's what I would use. If it shoots that 100 grain partition, go with that and hammer it. And if you want to go with the 6.5, nothing wrong with it either with that same bullet.
Yeah. Well, and I asked you how we got off on the 6.5 comparison, because we were talking about the history of the 243, which came around in the mid 1950s, 1955, introduced by Winchester. The 6.5, which everybody pokes fun of them. I do,
Hmm.
and like I said, I have one, and that's what I shoot most of my pigs with is a
Hmm.
6.5, and part of that was I could always find ammo during COVID,
Hmm.
so I kind of switched over from 308 or 223, which you could find ammo for them, but the 223, which is what I've probably shot more pigs with in my life than anything else, it just doesn't do enough damage. I
Hmm.
just got tired of. I don't want to try. I want them to just die right there. And the 223 was like, you're putting holes in them. That bullet's traveling so fast. Now I got to go find the dang things. Whereas, you bump it up from a 55 grain 223 bullet to 140 grain 6.5 Creedmoor. And the other thing is, I don't want something that's going to recoil much when I'm in a nighttime situation where it's like target acquisition. You shoot the first one. Okay, now I'm shooting at running pigs everywhere,
Hmm.
and I'm shooting off of a tripod or shooting sticks. Excuse me. Like that's important too. So, yeah, I actually do like the 6.5 Creedmoor. I have never shot a whitetail with it
Hmm.
or any other kind of big game, and some people shoot elk with it. You said Henry could shoot a kudu with it if he wanted to, but that that's just shot placement at that point. But the 6.5 came around in 2007, I think, introduced by Hornady.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that was Hornady's brainchild. Both of those cartridges.
Well, they hit a home run there because everybody loves it.
That's right. I mean, like I'll tell you, man, like a Hornady, they hit the easy button with that cartridge. A guy can go to Bass Pro or Cabela's or whatever, buy a Mossberg Patriot or Ruger American, put a Vortex Crossfire scope on it, shoot Hornady Precision Hunter ammo, and they can they could be banging steel at 1,000 yards on that first range session with it after they get it sighted in. It just seems to shoot so accurately out of factory rifles with factory ammo like that. It's great. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be hunting animals out there that far with it, and that's where people get into trouble with it. They also get into problems using bullets poorly suited for the task. But you and I have talked offline about this, how Tyler Friel from Outdoor Life killed a grizzly bear with a 6.5 Creedmoor.
Right.
But he used 140 grain Nosler partition, and he got a massive wound cavity and great penetration off of it. And that doesn't mean that that's the best grizzly bear cartridge in the world, but that's a good example of how good shot placement with a good bullet will just hammer even something big, and like a grizzly bear like that. So with those bullets, that caliber it leaves nothing on the table for the things that you're more likely to hunt with it: deer, elk, plains game in Africa.
Yeah. And so just reading a little bit about it, it's actually the parent case is a 30 Thompson Center, which I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Thompson Center, the 30 Thompson Center is kind of its own unique cartridge that Hornady made in combination with Thompson Center to basically give you 30-06 level performance out of a 308. If you look at it though, it is almost identical to a 308. So you could for all intents and purposes, it's not literally true. The 6.5 Creedmoor and the 243 are basically just offshoots of a 308, one neck down to 6 millimeter, one neck down to 6.5 millimeter. Remington actually made a cartridge called the 260 Remington, which is literally a 308 neck down to 6.5 millimeter. That is almost identical in performance to the 6.5 Creedmoor. It wasn't marketed quite as well as the Creedmoor was.
Remington's like, we really would like a do-over on that.
Yeah. Remington has had a history of kind of just doing crummy rollouts to otherwise pretty good cartridges, and that's the most recent
give us another example.
So the 280 Remington was one. That's the 6 millimeter Remington, which is their take on the 243 Winchester. It's descended from the 7 millimeter Mauser, and it's actually a little bit more powerful than a 243 Winchester. But like I was telling you earlier, how the 243 is a crossover caliber. You can use it for varmints and you can use it for deer. The 6 millimeter Remington initially didn't have a fast enough twist rate in it to stabilize like a 100 grain bullet. So it was more for varmints. And then the 243 came out, and it got really well established that you could use it for both. And then Remington fixed their problem with it. And sped up the twist rate, and you could use both in it and all of that, but the damage had been done, and the 243 was already established then, and so it's still around. People use it, people like it, all of that stuff, but that's why it's not more popular.
Which gun in your safe would you say is the most obscure caliber that you actually hunt with or have hunted with traditionally?
So that's a good question. I have several of those. So one that I've hunted with a lot is my 9.3 by 62 millimeter Mauser. It is not literally a 30-06 necked up, but it looks very similar to a 30-06 necked up to 3.66 caliber. I killed a Cape buffalo with it in Africa. I also have a 5.77 450 Martini Henry. If you've ever seen the movie Zulu, that was this rifle was literally a rifle used in the British Army back in the day. It was originally a black powder cartridge. You can hand load it with smokeless powder. I took that to Africa on my first hunt, so it's a single shot lever action. It's like a 45-70, just a little bit less powerful. Shoots a big heavy bullet, kind of slow, like 1,300 feet per second. I took that to Africa. I killed a deer with it and stuff, and that's probably actually the most obscure cartridge
I don't
I
know
have.
that I've ever even seen one, or if
Yeah.
someone handed me one and be like, "What is it? I don't even know what you're talking about here." Oh yeah,
It was
that's
real
interesting.
popular in the British Empire, and then of course in Africa and whatnot. A lot. There's still some of them kind of floating around
Hmm.
out there. But if you've ever seen, like I said, the movie Zulu, that's what the British soldiers are using in it.
Hmm. And going back to the 243 here, why did let's see? I was reading something interesting on why they developed it, but it was let's see, popular bullets 92. I thought there was a military component to it that I had read at some point, but maybe there wasn't.
I don't know if the military ever used the 243. Of course, it's descended from the military 7.62 by 51 or 308. And then anytime a new caliber comes out, people start necking it up and necking it down.
Yeah,
And that's what they did with the 308. You have the 7 millimeter '08, which is descended from the 308, just necked down to 7 millimeter. You have the 260 Remington. Then you had the 243, which is also really popular. 338 Federal going the other way, 358 Winchester. Both of those are larger caliber cartridges. Warren Page was a guy, he was a gun writer back in the 1950s. And like how Jack O'Connor's, his baby cartridge was the 270. Well,
uh-huh.
Warren Page had that kind of relationship with the 243. And, his work writing about it and hunting with it and saying how great it was and all that was one of those things that helped make it so popular as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, okay. So I was reading here an American Rifleman. So they're talking about the ashes of World War II, and then the the NATO was involved with this. They were looking for a replacement cartridge for the 30-06
Hmm.
Springfield,
Yep.
and then they settled on the 7.62 by 51, and then Winchester. That's when Winchester introduced the 308,
Hmm.
and then they wanted, I guess, something more for the consumer market, and that's when in 55 they came out with 243.
Yeah, so the
So
30-06 was a military cartridge for a long time, super popular among sportsmen, just kind of due to that angle. And so when the military
that's
developed
a
the,
that's an M1 Grand, right?
yep, so they used the M1
Yeah,
Garand, 1903 Springfield, the 308 gave them almost identical performance to the old 30-06 loads, but it was a lot shorter. And
yeah,
so they could go from the M1 Garand with its 8 round in block clip that was semi auto only to the M14, which you could have a 20 round detachable magazine for and shoot it full auto, but it was a lot of recoil shooting that thing full auto. Uh, and get the exact same performance with this new 308 or 7.62 by 51. And then, of course, anything that the military uses becomes hot stuff. And so Winchester standardized it and started shipping it to civilians. And then Remington did the same thing a few years later with the 223 Remington
hmm,
after the military uh, replaced the 7.62 by 51 with the 5.56 cartridge.
hmm. Interesting history. I love getting into it. Like obviously don't know as much about the history of popular hunting cartridges, military cartridges, which
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they transcend or end up, as a popular hunting cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's why I always like visiting with you because you are like a walking encyclopedia on firearm history. So
Well, I appreciate it, and it's fun to talk about, and it's always good coming on the show to talk about things like that. Talking about guns and hunting, that's a nice job to have.
yeah, and so going back to your moose hunt. You said you shot yours with the 7 PRC.
7 PRC,
Okay.
that's right, with Federal's 170 grain terminal ascent bullet.
Uh-huh. And so I have a 6.5 PRC. I shot a Coues deer with it.
Hmm.
Um, Same concept, the 7 PRC, and we have 300 PRCs. It's
Hmm.
just let's put a little extra juice. Let's put these things on steroids.
Yep. So the 6.5 and the 300 PRC came out first. The 6.5 PRC is a short action cartridge. That you have short action, you have a quote unquote standard or long action, you have a magnum length action. And the 6.5 is the short action cartridge, same as like a 6.5 Creedmoor, for instance. It's a little bit longer than the Creedmoor, but you could fit it in smaller rifles like that. And then the 300 PRC requires a full length magnum action. So it's a physically very big, very powerful cartridge. And it's 30 caliber too. And so people are like, man, you got a 6.5 and you got a 300, why don't you put a 7 millimeter right in the middle? And so that one is 7 millimeter, and it's a standard length action cartridge, same as a 30-06.
Mm.
So like a 308 is a short action, 30-06 is a standard action, and then a 300 PRC and like a 375 H&H are both full Magnum linked actions. Like all the Remington Ultra Magnums, all those are real big, long Magnum actions like that. So the 7 PRC is the most recent one. Hornady came out with it 2023. I got a rifle in 7 PRC in last year when it came out, and I took it to Africa. I've taken it deer hunting. I've hunted some exotics with it. I shot this moose with it. I'm also going to take it deer hunting this year here in Texas. And I'm just trying to, right now, actually the mission that I'm on right now is trying to use every single factory load that's available for it on a hunt.
Okay. So obviously it put down a moose pretty easily. One knock I've heard on the PRCs though is that, and this would only be relevant for people that shoot thousands of rounds, is that they'll burn up the barrels.
They certainly could. So
Okay.
for like a
It will never affect me in my lifetime. I'm never going to shoot my 6.5 PRC enough to ever, effectively damage the barrel. But for the competition guys, I don't know. Have they switched over from? And I think, within the last decade, it's been mostly 300 Win Mag, 308, 6.5 Creedmoor. Are those the three most popular long range competition?
I don't know that 300 Win Mag was ever a big competition cartridge. People certainly have used it for it. 308 was for a long time. 6.5 Creedmoor was originally developed for that purpose, and is continued to be used for that. And then a lot of 6 millimeters are used for it too. The PRCs, there are competitions that people use them in. That's not really so much my thing, so I can't speak so much intelligently about that more than what I just told you.
Sure.
The PRCs are really marketed from Hornady as hunting rounds. People use them for competitive shooting and all of that stuff, but like that's the angle that I really take with them. And you're right, like you got a couple thousand rounds of barrel life with them, and you got to be doing some serious hunting in order to burn up a barrel, even with a quote unquote shorter life like that, compared to something like a 308 that'll last darn near forever.
I think only I think of my buddy Carl at John X, and like that's the only person I know that would shoot that much actual, in actual hunting situations. When
Yeah,
you've
that's
got
funny
a
you
rifle
mentioned
in
that.
the field,
Yep.
7 months out of the year, Yeah, I mean,
I know an outfitter in Africa that has a 375 Ruger in a guide gun that they use for clients, and they've had it since 2016, and I think they've got about 4 to 5,000 rounds through it
yeah,
right now, and it's still going strong. It's still shooting great, but that's a lot of rounds to put through a gun like that, man.
yeah. It was a 7 LRM. It was a Gunworks rifle that they just had to get a new barrel for. So that
hmm
tells you how many times that thing had been shot.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. Well, cool stuff as always. I certainly appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your moose hunt with us. And I guess last question. I don't know if there's any new caliber out there. It might be the 7 PRC, but is there anything you've heard of that is coming out or has come out recently that you're like, oh, I want to get my hands on that, or I think this might be the next trendy thing like the 6.5 has been over the last decade.
So far this year, late this year, Winchester released the new 21 Sharp, and Hornady released the new 338 Arc. I don't really know so much about either one of them. The 338 Arc is made for AR-15s, supposed to work really well suppressed, kind of like a AR-15 version of the 8.6 Blackout. But that's like I basically have told you everything I know about
Yeah,
that cartridge at this point. I've never shot it or any of that stuff. I've not gotten super excited about it. I
I'm not a
really,
fan of the original Blackout,
yeah.
but like I've shot pigs with it. I've never owned one, but like outside of past 100 yards, it's losing so much velocity that it's especially a lot of guys are shooting subsonic ammo.
Yeah, the 300
So
Blackout is best up close. I've shot some hogs with it with supersonic Barnes bullets, and they work well. It's not oh, this is such amazing performance, just knocking my socks off, but they work well. And it's nice that it works in an AR-15. You can suppress them and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, it just gets a lot more challenging when you're going with that subsonic ammo. And Hornady says that they developed the new 338 ARC to really perform well, give you good terminal performance with that subsonic stuff. But I don't know. Like I said, I've
I'm
never even
skeptical,
shot it.
but we'll see.
I'm skeptical too, because I share your concerns about the subsonic ammo out of the 300 Blackout. But time will tell.
Yeah, I think the Blackout was one that like caught on for a couple years, but I think its popularity has waned.
And it was also kind of the leading edge of a trend like that. And maybe what's going on is, you have that cartridge that gets out there first, the people learn a lot of lessons from it, and then they make improvements to subsequent cartridges down the line. That could very well be what's going on here.
Sure. Well, good stuff. I appreciate it. Thanks again, John. Folks can check you out at the Big Game Hunting blog.
Big Game Hunting blog, Big
Blog.
Game Hunting podcast. That's my website and my podcast.
And social media, the Big Game Hunter.
At the Big Game Hunter _
Perfect. Well, thanks again, John. I hope you have a great rest of the season, and I'm sure we'll do it again sometime in the near future.
All right. I appreciate it, Cable. Always a pleasure joining you on your show. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Take care.